good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are watching from. Welcome back to WisdomHoneyFarm. On today's episode, I'm taking you along as I visit my farm and work on some of my hives. This particular hive you are seeing is one of the local hives I made some time ago. It is the type of hive that doesn't have frames inside. It is basically an empty wooden box with 4 sides covered, which is then placed in a suitable location where bees can come and colonize it. So, as you can see, I'm already prepared. Everything is set. Let's go to the farm. Arriving at the farm. So, this is me walking into the farm. As I entered, I noticed one of my empty boxes along the way. Fortunately, this particular box had been invaded by ants, and not just 1 or 2 ants. There were plenty of ants inside the box. This is something I'm going to address in another episode. I'm going to show you how I get rid of the ants, clean these empty boxes, and prepare them properly as swarm catching boxes for the coming swarm season. Here in my community, our major swarm season usually falls around October, November, and December. So before that period comes, I want to make sure these boxes are properly prepared and ready to attract new colonies. That'll be a separate video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. The farm is doing well now. As you can see, this is the farm. The farm is doing well. You can see the bees are very active. There is one particular colony that has been here for several months. Whenever I come to the farm, I usually see a lot of bees around this hive. Because the colony has become very strong and well established, I decided that it was time to give them additional space. But there was one major problem. This hive is frameless. The bees have been building their honeycomb directly onto the wooden box and the cover. Because there are no proper frames, dividing the colony or harvesting the honey from it would be very difficult. So, this is the particular hive we're talking about. As you can see, the box is heavily occupied by bees. This was around 3 p.m. and you could see the bees actively moving around the entrance. So I decided that instead of disturbing the colony, I would construct another box and use it as a super. Measuring the hive. The first thing I needed to do was take accurate measurements of the existing hive. I needed to measure the length, width, and other dimensions so that I could use those measurements to construct the new super box. So here I'm using my tape to measure the hive. The measurement I got was approximately 17.4 inches on one side. The other measurement was around 17.5 inches. After taking the measurements, I left the farm and went home so I could use them to construct the new box. Before leaving, I also took some time to show you around the farm. As you can see, we have several active colonies. This particular colony is hive number 003, and it is one of the strongest and most active colonies on my farm. So, this is what WisdomHoneyFarm currently looks like. If you're watching us for the first time, welcome. This is our beekeeping journey. Constructing the super. This episode is basically divided into 3 parts. Number 1, measuring the hive. Number 2, constructing the new super box. And number 3, installing the super box on the existing colony. After returning home with the measurements, I started cutting the wood according to the dimensions I took from the farm. This is the box I constructed. I'm not going to spend too much time showing you how I built it, because I've already made a separate video explaining how to construct this type of hive. If you want to learn how to make this kind of box, check the description of this video. You will find the link there. After completing the box, it was time to return to the farm. Back to the farm. Now we are back at the farm. It was later in the evening, around 5 to 6 p.m. As you can see, the colony is still very active. There are plenty of bees around the entrance. My plan was to remove the cover and install the new super box on top. Before opening the hive, I used my smoker around the entrance and around the hive. The reason I'm smoking the bees is to help keep them calmer while I'm working. If I simply opened the hive without preparing the bees, they could become defensive, especially because I had a lot of work to do. So, I smoked the hive properly and prepared myself to open it. Inspecting the other hives. After that, I moved to the other hives. There were 3 hives I wanted to inspect, including 2 Langstroth hives. These particular colonies had not been very active in recent weeks, so I wanted to check their condition. One of them was showing signs of development. I noticed that the bees had started working on a frame and were beginning to build comb. With proper management, I believe this colony could become productive in the coming weeks. But there was another hive that I wanted to investigate because something didn't seem right. And by the end of this video, you will see exactly what I discovered. Opening the strong colony. Now I went back to the main hive that brought us here today. I smoked the hive again, then it was time to open it. As you can see, wow, look at the number of bees. This is a very strong colony. If you look closely, you will notice something very important. There is only one proper frame inside this hive. I was the one who added that frame previously when part of the original box became damaged. Apart from that, the hive is basically frameless. The bees have been building their comb directly inside the box. And that is exactly why I decided to add a super. Why I added the super. Because this type of hive is frameless, harvesting honey from it can be very difficult. The bees attach their comb directly to the wooden structure, making it difficult to remove the comb without damaging it. So, instead of disturbing the colony, I decided to add a super box on top. The plan is for the bees to continue using the lower section as their main brood area while they build additional comb and store surplus honey in the upper section. This should make future inspection and harvesting much easier. So I went outside, brought the new super box and brought it into the farm. I placed it on top of the existing hive, but then I noticed something. The frames were not positioned correctly. Instead of running in the proper direction, they were sitting at an angle, so I had to remove the box, reposition the frames, and set everything correctly. Now you can see that the frames are properly aligned. The super is now in position. I covered the hive, and that part of the installation was complete. The potential of this colony. Now let me tell you something interesting. When you look at a colony this strong and imagine what it could become with proper management, the potential is enormous. If this colony continues to grow strongly and the conditions are right, it may eventually be able to occupy several supers. Imagine having 3, 4, 5, or even more supers above a strong colony. That means more space for the bees to store surplus honey and potentially more honey for the beekeeper to harvest. But this is not something I want to rush. My plan is to wait for the appropriate swarm and honey flow season when conditions are more favorable. During that period, I plan to construct a proper iron stand, elevate the hive from its current position, and place it securely on the stand. From there, I can gradually add additional supers as the colony develops. With proper management and favorable conditions, this could eventually become one of the major productive colonies at WisdomHoneyFarm. But remember, beekeeping requires patience. You cannot simply keep adding boxes without considering the strength of the colony, available forage, weather conditions, and the bees' ability to occupy the additional space. The empty boxes with ants. Now let's go back to the empty boxes I mentioned earlier. As I usually check my farm, I noticed that almost all the boxes that were not colonized had been invaded by ants. There were plenty of ants inside them. This is a very serious problem because a swarm is unlikely to choose a box that is already heavily occupied by pests. So I'm going to deal with these boxes, but that will be in another episode. I'll show you how I clean them, get rid of the ants, and prepare them as swarm catching boxes before our swarm season begins. So, if you're interested in learning how to prepare a hive to catch a swarm naturally, make sure you subscribe to WisdomHoneyFarm. Inspecting another colony. Now we moved to another hive. This particular hive used to be one of the strongest colonies on my farm. It was doing extremely well before, but unfortunately, a lot of things happened. I wasn't sure what caused the decline, so today I decided to inspect the colony properly and find out what was happening inside. When I looked at the top of the hive, it appeared as though the bees were no longer using the super properly. So, I decided to open it. But opening this hive wasn't easy. There were several gaps underneath, and the bees had sealed them with propolis. If you're new to beekeeping, propolis is a sticky resin that bees collect from plants and use to seal cracks and unwanted openings inside the hive. The bees had sealed this hive very strongly. So I had to use my hive tool and a knife carefully to loosen everything. Finally, I was able to remove the cover. Now it was time to see what was really happening inside. What I discovered. Surprisingly, the colony was still alive and active. The bees were there. But I noticed something important. They didn't seem comfortable with the existing super. The super itself wasn't necessarily the biggest problem. The frames were the problem. Look carefully at these frames. You can see how they were constructed. These were some of the older frames I made before I had enough experience with proper hive construction and accurate measurements. At that time, I was still learning. Now that I've gained more experience, I can clearly see the mistakes in the earlier equipment. So I've decided that I'm going to replace those frames and construct better ones. I'm not going to do that today. I'll return in the next episode and show you exactly how I removed the old frames and replaced them. And just to document the timeline, this video was recorded on August 15th, 2026. Another colony. Now let's move to another colony. This is also a strong colony, but it was experiencing a similar problem. I wasn't sure why the colony wasn't progressing as expected. When I opened it, however, I could see that there were still active bees inside. So I continued with the inspection. I used my hive tool to carefully lift the bars, and what I saw was honestly shocking. The combs had been abandoned. There was no visible honey, no brood, no stored pollen, no obvious nectar, nothing. There was no obvious sign of normal colony activity on the comb. I was honestly disappointed. I had been looking at this hive for the past 2 or 3 months thinking that I had a colony doing well inside, but I had never properly inspected it, and that taught me a very important lesson. The importance of hive inspection. As a beekeeper, you cannot know what is happening inside a hive simply by looking at the entrance. You might see bees flying in and out and assume everything is fine. But when you open the hive and inspect it properly, you may discover a completely different situation. That is why regular hive inspection is so important. The exact inspection schedule depends on the colony, weather, season, and your management system. But you should have a consistent inspection routine. Look at the brood area, look at the food stores, look at the comb, look for pests, look for signs that the queen is present and laying. Check the condition of the frames and the hive structure. And most importantly, record what you find. If I had inspected this colony earlier, I might have discovered the problem much sooner. Since I started beekeeping, I had never carried out an inspection like this before, and this experience has taught me something I will never forget. Don't assume your colony is doing well just because you see bees coming in and going out. Open the hive, inspect it, understand what is happening inside. That is how you become a better beekeeper. The final correction. After installing the super on the first hive, I also noticed another problem. The size of the super box was not exactly the same as the size of the original brood box. Because of that difference, the cover didn't fit properly. I tried adjusting it, but I could see that the two boxes were not perfectly matched. And this is another lesson that beekeeping has taught me. Small measurements matter. When constructing a hive equipment, accuracy is extremely important. If the dimensions are not correct, you can end up with gaps, poor fitting, or equipment that becomes difficult to manage. So this is something I will have to correct, and that's part of my journey at Wisdom Honey Farm. We learn, we make mistakes, we correct them, and we keep improving. What happened started the inspection. Unfortunately, my phone battery became very low at this point, so I couldn't record everything that happened afterward. What I eventually did was remove the abandoned combs and leave the box clean. The bees were still active, so my hope is that they remain in the hive and rebuild. I'm going to continue monitoring this colony closely. Hopefully, with proper management and favorable conditions, they can recover and become productive again. And that is another important lesson from this episode. Beekeeping is not always about harvesting honey. Sometimes it is about understanding what went wrong, correcting the problem, and giving the colony a chance to recover. Final message. So, guys, this brings us to the end of today's episode. If you are a beginner beekeeper, please learn from my experience. Don't neglect your hives. Don't just put bees inside a box and forget about them. Your colonies need observation, proper management, and regular inspection. You don't have to open your hives unnecessarily every day, but you should establish an appropriate inspection routine for your conditions. If you see something unusual, investigate it. Because sometimes the biggest problems inside the hive are the things you cannot see from outside. Thank you so much for watching Wisdom Honey Farm. If you're new here, please subscribe. Like this video, share it with another beekeeper, and leave a comment telling me what you would like me to discuss in the next episode. And remember, one community, one hive, one future. This is Wisdom Honey Farm. Thank you for watching.